We have been engaged by so many inspiring individuals who are passionate about change and change that is done with and through care to our climate, our land and water, our relationships, our communities, all within the context of mental health promotion. We have listened to stories of change and impact and other ways that we do this through people, place, policy, partnerships, and practice. We have learned from content specialists that momentum can occur within the domains of practice, policy, and research. We have heard from project teams right across Canada that work really hard to prevent negative mental health and to promote instead mental well-being. So how does this local and national work connect to the global momentum for upstream mental health approaches? And how, and the essence of this AS, how do we keep this momentum going? So this question and these thoughts bring us to our closing keynote speaker, who will consider global perspectives in mental health promotion and how we can get further with the lessons that we all have learned over these last 2 days together. So allow me the opportunity to welcome Gregor Henderson. Gregor is an independent advisor on mental health and well-being, working with a range of organizations and governments internationally. Previously, he was the Director of Mental Health for Public Health England. And Gregor led the organization's mental health response to COVID, no small doing, and championed the national mental health literacy program called Every Mind Matters. And I would really encourage you to look at that website. It's simply phenomenal. Not just a believer, but a doer. Gregor is known and respected for stepping away from those silos and for really combining policy, research, practice, communities, and equally important, or more importantly, people's lived experiences to help transform the way people and communities think and act about mental health and well-being. He will share global perspectives for upstream approaches to mental health that have implications for us here in Canada. So a very warm welcome to you, Gregor.
Colleen, thank you very much for those kind words. It's a real honor to join you. It's evening here. I'm living in Italy now. I think Brexit, the decision of the UK to leave the European Union was too much for me, so I'm now residing in Italy. My heart is still very much in Scotland, but at least I can buy fresh tomatoes and salad in Italy, which apparently you can in the supermarkets in the UK. Anyway, thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I have a very hopefully interesting presentation. And so I hope you've enjoyed your symposium over the last day and today as well. I've got a few things I'd like to go through with you from a perspective. I've been fortunate enough to work in a number of different jurisdictions, but let me just say a little bit about my background. So I am the son of a psychiatrist and a special needs teacher from the north of Scotland. We lived on the site of a local psychiatric hospital for the first 10 years of my life, and that was my community. I didn't know any other community. That was my family home, and I felt very at home in the whole hospital environment, and we were made as our family to feel very much part of it. It became obvious to me that where I lived and the family, people I called my family, were not quite viewed the same way by our other local residents. And when I invited friends to come back to my house and we would stare from the bottom of a long drive, didn't they always have long driveways? And they would say, "You live up there?" And I say, "Yeah, it's great, come on in." So it struck me that the world and that I took to be as my world and my normal world was not the same for other people. And those early experiences have never left me. But I have moved more away from mental health services, although my heart's still very much there, and began to float upstream as I began to see that no matter what we were trying to do in service land, it really didn't make much of a difference to the core aspects of people's lives. And however hard we tried, however much investment we were making, we still weren't really improving people's lives. And there was a wonderful phrase from a book in America in the 1990s describing the American psychiatric system and the lives for people. It was better, but not well. So I started floating upstream to find out what was going on, and I've never really stopped that journey. So as I'm continually floating upstream, let me share some reflections with you. Can I have the next slide, please? This is what I'm going to try and go through, and someone please give me a time check at 20 minutes. I'm going to just outline some reflections on mental health policy over the last 20 years, give you some upfront observations of what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking about what's happening, why now, and the evidence for what you do in the work that you do on mental health promotion, and the promotion of mental well-being is so important, some international examples, what we're learning, and just some reflections on what might help. Okay, so let's go. Next slide, please. So if I think about national mental health developments, please don't read too much into the slides. This is me giving myself a nice guide, but there have been, to my mind, 3 phases over the last 20 years in terms of mental health policy. The first phase was almost universally focused on services, moving things into community services, community teams, crisis response. Remember, a lot of this had been going on since the late 50s, early 60s. Primary care, mental health care was emerging a little bit, but the focus was on mental illness treatment. It was clinically led and typically top down. We then moved into a phase around the 80s and 90s, which had much more of a recovery orientation, advanced and progressed by many wonderful recovery leaders from across the world, particularly from North America and Canada. Lived experience informed, trauma informed, more culturally informed, and had a lot more emphasis on a rights base. Psychological services for anxiety and depression beginning to emerge. New mental health acts, for example, the one in Scotland, were looking at reciprocity. If they take away someone's freedom, they promise to give something back in return. Much wider service system, health, social care, a little bit of education, much more into employment. There was a broader coalition and a really important rights focus. But that's moved on again since then. And we're now in what I would call a phase 3 with government and international mental health policies. We're looking at mental health strategies, a much wider focus, illness and wellness, and the balance and or tensions between the two. Much more use of the phraseology mental well-being, because somehow mental health isn't cutting it in terms of the upstream language people want to see. Much more focus on social determinants, many more players getting involved, a large narrative around jobs, homes, friends, big mix of stakeholders, looking at others, whether it's education, criminal justice, much more complexity, moving out of the health domain and visibly moving upstream into what you and I would call promotion and prevention. Next slide, please. Now, whilst all of that is wonderful and welcome, and listen, it doesn't happen necessarily sequentially, and we sometimes dip back through the phases. There are places that you'll recognize are probably still working on phase 1, some on phase 2, and there have been challenges everywhere. But let me just give some observations. So isn't it great that governments are increasingly committed to a broader vision for mental health? That's fantastic. And as I'll say later, governments don't always really land well on prevention. We hear many times prevention is better than cure, but when you're working in 3, 4, and 5-year political cycles, there may not be the return on benefits by going into prevention land. So we get a lot of really nice, encouraging words, which I don't want to decry because they authorize the behaviors we want to see. But the funding invariably defaults to mental health services. It certainly does in the jurisdictions I've got experience of working in most. And that's a political and what we call our treasury in the UK, but your finance ministers. And that bias is around, policy. The second one is ministries of health are also committed, as well as governments, to a broader vision for mental health. But again, their funding invariably defaults to services. And that's part of the political culture of being in a health department and problems of cross-departmental working and cross-government working. In the jurisdictions that I've worked in, I find it sometimes quite disappointing that ministries aren't awarded for cross-agency or cross-departmental working. Everyone agrees that good mental health is a desirable goal, mental well-being for all, but most people still hear mental health and equate that with illness and as a problem, which is the role of the health services to fix. And those are culture and public perception problems. So we need to ask ourselves, do any of these observations make sense? And if they do, what can we do to change the narrative and shift those observations? Next set of observations, please. Next slide. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So government departments want health money and they want investment for mental health interventions, but that's challenging. The mental health system is a difficult one to understand and navigate for non-mental health people, and that allows the expert pathology system leaders to take more of the control. And professional expertise, in my experience, is more highly valued at government level than lived experience and community experience, and professional advocacy still dominates in the corridors of power. And mental health is seen as a problem to fix, not a desirable goal in itself. And it's easier to focus on services than it is the drivers of poor mental health. Next slide, please. So on the upside, mental health professionals are now more positively disposed to prevention and promotion. In the UK, the recent person who's been voted in as the leader of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, Dr. Laddie Smith, is a very pro-social determinants, pro-promotion and prevention leader. Other government departments are insufficiently incentivized to the pursuit of mental health outcomes. And for those of us who are working with and for people with severe and enduring mental illness, their whole of life needs are mostly invisible in other government department policies, whether that's welfare, housing, employment, or education. And it still strikes me that the mental health of society's most vulnerable is insufficiently prioritized. And does our focus on mental well-being help that or exacerbate it? Next slide, please. Why now? Well, we're emerging from COVID. That's shown the importance of communities, neighborhoods, tackling the social determinants, growing gaps in inequalities, and the effects that COVID has had on the most vulnerable and marginalized, and the huge swathes of racial injustice that we've seen across the world in relation to the response to COVID. The evidence for promotion and prevention is growing and getting stronger. And there are many good examples from research and practice, and thankfully many agencies now investing in research and promotion and prevention. And your Public Health Agency of Canada needs to be congratulated for its investment in research and practice. The investment in upstream prevention is happening, but let's be honest, it's slow and smaller scale, but the return on investment is hugely beneficial. A recent study from the UK Health Foundation showed that for every dollar spent, you get a 3 times return downstream for your investments in promotion and prevention. So we can make the evidence argument, we can make the funding and investment argument, but can we make the policy, practice, and impact argument? Next slide, please. Well, what helps? Well, the evidence helps. And these are some examples from a recent meta-analysis done by colleagues in Galway University. And these are some of the things that you all know. And I was looking at some of the projects that you're funding through the FACT initiatives, both the COVID initiative and your mental health promotion initiatives. And you're funding all the right things that have the evidence. But it is interesting, we know the evidence of what works in early years, for schools, for communities. Next slide, please. We know for primary care, and we're looking now at digital. Okay, it may be a lot of digital is CBT online, so we're transferring what we normally do in the traditional system to an online environment. That was hugely beneficial during COVID, but there are a range of other platforms, particularly peer support platforms that provide 24/7 support whenever you want, wherever you want, for communities right across the globe. And you in Canada have examples of these peer support platforms. And they provide this asynchronous support when you need it, when you want it, no waiting times, absolutely immediate wraparound support. And we see a number of governments like yours making investments in a range of areas for which we need to be grateful, but also asking more from. Next slide, please. That's the reference for the evidence impact. The organizers will share my slides, so you'll be able to get that. It's done by colleagues in the University of Galway in Ireland, and it'll be available soon. It was commissioned by the Irish government, but that will be available soon. Very, very impactful synthesis of the impact and the evidence. Next slide, please. So here's some country examples. Let's start with the first country, New Zealand. Well, New Zealand has this amazing written policy. If you haven't seen it, it's a long, large policy document, and it goes by the Maori name of Kia Mana Wanui. And it's a long-term pathway to mental well-being. It brings with it $1.9 billion of investment from the New Zealand government. Now, $1.9 billion, you can do the maths, it's probably equivalent to 1.9 Canadian dollars, 1.9 billion Canadian dollars. That is a cross-government investment. It's got a hugely warm welcome to its bicultural approach, with huge emphasis on the Maori and Pacific Island communities. And it is part of wider government action on well-being. Many of you will probably be aware that Jacinda Ardern and the New Zealand government have a well-being policy that's meant to drive the Treasury investment of policies in that part of the world. Next slide, please. So how's it going? Well, the investment is welcome, but when we look at where the investment has gone and is going, the vast majority is still going on services. But that's not to say that of a proportion higher than other countries, I would argue. In the UK, we had a 500 million investment over COVID, and something like 15 million came to the prevention and promotion agenda. So I think New Zealand, while the vast majority of funding is going into services, still a larger proportion of that than other jurisdictions is going to promotion and prevention. There is a current transition to a new health system in New Zealand. Don't those things always get in the way? But that is impeding the operation and impact of the policy. It has a very welcome focus on primary care, with local community health approaches being invested in, where people are coming into the general practice hubs, they're getting seen, but they're also being able to go to someone like a community navigator, a community organizer, that will put the most simple and effective psychosocial interventions in place to improve that person's recovery or to improve their ability to deal with the health challenges they face. It has a very promising bicultural focus, and the well-being overview is still incredibly important, that this policy on mental well-being is part of a wider, more overarching cabinet-led policy. Next slide, please. In Scotland, they have a very comprehensive and integrated policies for mental health that include everything from the promotion of mental health and well-being right through to services, forensic services, and their Mental Health Act. So if you like a policy document, please Google the Scottish Government mental health pages on their website. It does make a very comprehensive and integrated read. They're doing a consultation on a new strategy, a longer term strategy, and they're looking within that at the reasons behind poor mental health, creating the conditions both individually and collectively for people to thrive in communities, challenging stigma, and also where necessary, providing specialist help. Next slide. Well, how's that going? Impressive range of interrelated policies. Measurement is a key focus in Scotland, and they have a key indicators framework that includes a whole battery of measures and indicators on mental well-being. And one of those indicators, the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, is still one of the top 21 national performance indicators for how Scotland is doing. So if you have a measurement that you feel is effective in measuring the mental well-being of your country and jurisdiction, please fight and work as hard as you can to get those measures into national indicators. They have a very interesting focus on brief interventions, what they call their distress brief intervention program, which is for anyone feeling in mental distress momentarily to get in touch with a service locally that will provide a psychosocial and non-clinical response. Very community orientated, very community-based, very community-led. There will be a response within 24 hours, 48 hours holding, and if necessary, up to 2 weeks of interventions through this DBI program. They're strong on digital, although admittedly, wave one more about putting therapies and face-to-face online. The question still to remain as to whether the cross-government buy-in will continue and will emerge more fully from the consultation process. Next slide, please. Let's move south of the border to England. Impressive amount of cross-government work over COVID, very impressive COVID-19 mental health recovery plan, cabinet driven, had some money, cross-departmental commitments and shared responsibility with some short-term investment upstream. And again, they've consulted widely on a 10-year mental health strategy with cross-government ambitions for mental well-being. Next slide. Unfortunately, this is not going so well. They have totally lost momentum in cross-government work. Upstream investment is all but gone. Now it's all about health services rather than health. And even the leader of the opposition in England or the UK, Keir Starmer, said one of his 5 promises is to make the health services and NHS better. No talk about wider health, community health, orientation towards a more salutogenic approach to health. And there is no long-term mental health strategy. It's to be replaced by a 6-condition strategy. Admittedly, that includes mental illness and dementia, but that takes us right back into conditions and services. So sometimes you can see gains are made only to be lost with a change in leadership, change in government, or a change in public policy emphasis. Next slide, please. Ireland, a strong range of mental health policies. Again, a recent government focus on well-being and community well-being, led by the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, begun to embed mental health promotion in cross-government work, very strong in education and young people, and they've established a national mental health promotion steering group being guided by the evidence produced by Professor Margaret Barry and her colleagues in Galway. Next slide. How's that going? Well, the well-being focus nationally is at an early stage, but it's part of something bigger. Mental health promotion will be hopefully part of this focus. Investment is still strongest in services, and there's a bit of a confusion of who owns promotion because the health service executive produced a very good document called Sharing the Vision, talking about mental health promotion. So who owns promotion? Does it come from services or does it come from the wider mental well-being public health field? Very strong community-focused actions, an encouraging range of projects. And the one thing about Ireland, which I think you also have in Canada, is there's been a very good level of investment and a good level of mental health promotion or public mental health expertise. Next slide, please. Singapore, they have a very interesting, more practically based model based on community neighborhood hubs, wellness hubs in local neighborhoods with integrated services and supports, supporting families and individuals, providing a range of integrated psychosocial services, support, screening, early intervention, information and onward referral. Bereavement, relationship support, family support, caregiver support. You can see here a very integrated hub. Obviously a very urban city. Again, population similar to, Singapore population of 4 or 5 million, Scotland a population of 5 million, Ireland between 4 and 5 million, New Zealand 5 million, something about that magic 4 to 5 million that seems to make it easier to get things done. How's it going in Singapore? Next slide. Well, strong focus on neighborhoods, integrating mental health and mental well-being in community hubs, good public awareness and social marketing, really interesting marketing, social marketing, high levels of interest and digital technologies. Mental health services still dominate, but they've got a unit of innovation inside the health department dedicated to driving a whole of health approach. Very impressive. Next slide, please. Challenges and opportunities. Let's see what some of the challenges are. This was a quote from a colleague of mine called Lynn Friedley back in 2009, when we were doing work for WHO on mental health, resilience, and inequalities. I can't believe it's nearly, gosh, 20, you do the maths, but it's a long time ago. Even then, levels of mental distress amongst communities need to be understood less in terms of individual pathology and more as a response to poverty, deprivation, and social injustice. These are the things that erode the emotional, spiritual, and intellectual resources essential to our psychological well-being. I think what Lynn said in 2009 still has a huge resonance for me, or maybe I've just been spending a little bit too much time on UK policies, but I don't know, maybe it speaks to you too. Next slide, please. I've just had the 20-minute warning, so thank you, Annette. This is something that a great sociologist called Zygmunt Bauman said in 2007, not in response to Lynn, but on the same vein. And I just wonder if some of this still sticks in some of our policy making and gives us the kind of impetus we need to challenge some of the policy paradigms that we see in front of us. Although the risks and contradictions of life go on being as socially produced than ever, the duty and necessity of coping them has been delegated to our individual selves. One of the things that I love most about the promotion and prevention agenda and the work that you do and people like you do is that whole of community, is that whole emphasis on structural and social determinants and not letting ourselves be hoodwinked or somehow the wool pulled over our eyes that individually exhorting individuals to do better is going to make a significant difference. We have to be working at individual community, policy, and structural levels at every single one time. We know that. Next slide, please. What you do is needed now more than ever. You carry the banner for that more integrated upstream whole of life approach, focusing on the wider determinants, working in, for, and with communities. And you seek to understand and combat the structural determinants and the injustice that happens and promoting the rights of Indigenous peoples. So the urgency of what you and others do couldn't be more urgently stated. Next slide, please. One of the things that we are though facing is an uphill battle in convincing our governments to be more preventative. And this is a recent book, or more like a kind of pamphlet, by Paul Kearney and his colleague Emily St. Denny in the UK. And it's a very interesting read. It looks at different examples from public health. It looks at the example of tobacco, but the take home is in short burst timelines of 3, 4, and 5 years for governments, it's not any wonder that they don't focus on longer term objectives. But when we push the politicians and different political parties to take a longer term vision and give them the courage and the evidence with which to make these bold steps, we and the work that you do are some of the people that give them that courage to go more upstream, invest more in prevention, and see the longer term investment. And if governments and politicians don't have that longer term vision, part of our job and responsibility is to show people why that is possible, how that can be, and the gains that can be made, and to make their political choices based on that evidence and knowledge. Next slide, please. Sometimes having a framework to guide your actions help. Next slide, please. And this is a framework that I've found helpful. If you look at the internal side and the external side, the internal is what we feel is internal to ourselves. The external side is those things like services, like systems, like the culture and political context. And this is an integral vision, and it's helped guide some of the work that myself and others have done. Because if you go too much on the internal, you can get lost. Too much on the external, you can lose the connection with yourself and also with communities. So the trick here is to try and make sure that you are pursuing a line in every single one of these quadrants and keeping those lines equal. So you're paying attention to the individual. You're paying attention to the collective and what that means for our internal world and our internal sense of self and working, and the external world at the same time, influencing and changing services and systems, be it health, be it education, but also influencing and advocating for the cultural and political context to be open and ready and aware with what we need for the evidence for mental well-being. So it can be a helpful framework. And finally, my last slide. What can help? Well, it's hard. The work that you do is hard. And you need sustenance. And you get that sustenance by sharing your experiences and learning together. And symposiums and hubs like this are your community of practice. And working on your narrative, creating that sense of urgency from your practice, from your experience, from the voices of those that you're working with. And creating the forums with and through others to share your experiencing views and ideas, going beyond health, working with your allies, that wider coalition of interests, and being part of a wider change, whatever that is, whether it's well-being, the environment, sustainable growth, and lastly, really understanding the political framework. My last slide. What we do is hard, but it's emerging. We are all disruptors in the mental health space, and that can sometimes agitate some colleagues in other parts of the mental health ecosystem. But if we can do that in a respectful and a kind way, not everyone will get what we say, but we do what we do with the humility and knowledge that we are doing this based on our own, our families, and our community's lived experience. And we need each other. And from my fortunate position to be able to go to different jurisdictions around the world, there is a huge global family and community out there who we can learn from, be inspired by, and learn and make that impact that we all want to make together. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Gregor, for so seamlessly weaving in the lessons of the last 2 days into a message emphasizing really how the global is local. That's just so incredibly impressive. Thank you. And many of the global perspectives you shared actually do fit into our local context. You have given us an excellent overview of what's happening in New Zealand, Scotland, Ireland, Singapore, and what actually works to keep the momentum going in an upstream way that everyone can contribute to, whether it's those with lived experience through peer support, providers in the community, policymakers, researchers, funders, and others, and the importance of evidence and measurement to change the discourse of mental health promotion. Thank you for capping off our annual symposium conversations in such an inspirational, evidence-based, and uplifting way. I'll now hand it over to Alice, who's going to introduce the next speaker.
Thanks so much, Colleen, and thank you, Gregor. What an inspirational talk. I was getting a little bit discouraged there when you were saying some things weren't working, but we are on the right track, which is wonderful to hear, and bringing our community together here across Canada, that we are part of a larger community, all working toward mental health promotion. We have some good models that we can look to around the world in terms of some of that momentum that is working. So thanks so much for that. So I'm pleased to introduce Rosamond Dunkley as our next speaker, who is the Director of Mental Health Promotion and Wellbeing, and she'll provide some closing remarks and reflections about our conference on behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada. Thanks, Rosamond.
Thank you, Alice, for your introduction and for inviting me to provide these closing remarks on behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada. And thanks to you, Gregor, for bringing your international perspectives to this session. The observations and international trends you describe have given us many things to think about, and we can learn from these examples. I join you today from the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation in Ottawa. I value the opportunity to live and work in this region. I also acknowledge the Indigenous leadership and multiple ways of knowing that have been highlighted throughout this symposium, In particular, the role of relationships, the relationships we have with each other, with our culture, and with our environment. Such meaningful perspectives will continue to influence our knowledge base, work, and collective efforts to build momentum in mental health promotion. It has been an insightful and marvelous 2 days. I've been reflecting on what it means to leverage momentum for mental health promotion and why it's critical and how this can be achieved. As we've discussed, in order to support mental health promotion, we need to address the broader eco-social determinants of health and aim to build and support protective factors at the individual, community, and structural levels. I would also like to acknowledge that truth and reconciliation have been salient in meaningful ways throughout this event. Reconciliation requires humility, deep listening, learning, and supporting Indigenous health and well-being. As noted by Minister Bennett in her opening remarks, it's so important to listen to personal stories and deliver culturally appropriate and trauma-informed approaches. I want to acknowledge all of the work that the Public Health Agency of Canada funded projects are accomplishing to integrate these approaches for their communities. Reconciliation also includes honoring Indigenous, place-based, self-determined ways of knowing and understanding the world, which are inseparable from mental wellness. This was emphasized by our keynote speaker, Dr. Shannon Waters, with reference to the need to focus upstream and focus on culture, language, and land as a way to build individual and structural protective factors for young Canadians. As we saw in the framework where Dr. Waters' daughter saw herself represented, there are many broad environmental, cultural, economic, and social factors that influence our emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental well-being. Key to this work are the relationships that we develop. I hope that some new connections have blossomed at this symposium. Over the past 2 days, we've also had the pleasure of hearing some notable highlights from the work of the Mental Health Promotion Innovation Fund projects and some of the supporting the mental health of those most affected by COVID-19 projects that have only just begun. I really enjoyed the summaries and videos that have been developed for the gallery walk. It was lovely to see how health equity is highly integrated from project design to activities within the Innovation Fund and the mental health of COVID investment projects, and the diverse ways that communities are being supported across the country. Leadership and innovations in this area will continue to inform and grow efforts for mental health promotion. As many of you know, several projects from the COVID mental health stream are beginning to launch and will reach many populations, including youth, older adults, First Nations, Inuit and Métis, Black and other racialized Canadians. These projects will also reach healthcare, frontline, and other essential workers. The opportunities to build linkages and relationships with each other through the KD&E Hub provides further momentum for the field of mental health promotion and opportunities for shared learning. I'd like to recognize the flexibility and responsiveness of the projects and practitioners delivering community-based interventions. You have continuously worked towards supporting and adapting to the needs of children, youth, and families across Canada throughout the pandemic and across the situations that it exacerbated. Thank you for your engagement with the KD&E Hub. The shared experiences of adaptation and innovation during the pandemic are so useful as many of you and other organizations continue to deliver projects with hybrid approaches. I want to thank you for your active role and passion for your communities. Je voudrais féliciter le Carrefour DEC pour avoir eu plus de 300 personnes qui se sont inscrites et plus d'une centaine qui ont participé aux sessions auxquelles j'ai participé. Il a été rafraîchissant et instructif de participer à ce symposium. Je suis heureuse de constater que cette opportunité a permis de rassembler des personnes issues de diverses organisations communautaires, nationales et autochtones, ainsi que des universités et tous les niveaux de gouvernement. Les sessions simultanées, engageantes et interactives ont favorisé de précieux échanges de connaissances et de perspectives sur des sujets importants. C'était vraiment inspirant et je suis sûre que nous quitterons tous cet événement avec un regard neuf et optimiste sur la façon dont notre travail peut faire progresser la promotion de la santé mentale. Il a été aussi très instructif de participer aux sessions qui ont mis en lumière les leviers de changement. C'est là que l'histoire de la promotion de la santé mentale sur le terrain et la nécessité d'actions intersectorielles a vraiment pris vie. Vous avez créé de nombreuses innovations qui soutiennent les populations locales que vous servez. De plus, au cours de la discussion d'aujourd'hui, j'ai été inspirée par les connexions et les échanges qui façonneront certainement notre travail futur. Ce fort sentiment d'appartenance et d'objectif qui a résonné chez nombreux d'entre vous vous permettra de poursuivre l'élan et la croissance de ce domaine. As we reflect on how we can best leverage the lessons learned over the past few years, I hope that this symposium has re-inspired and reconnected you with others and motivated you to collectively move forward. I want to reiterate messages shared by Shannon Waters and Gregor Henderson. We all have a crucial role in the work towards maintaining and bolstering the field of mental health promotion. Through multi-sectoral action, a determinants of health focus, and meaningful reciprocal relationships, we can support long-term sustainable transformations. We can also facilitate significant systems level shifts and everyday improvements for individuals and communities. To accomplish this, interventions need to be designed in partnership with the communities they serve, in addition to the local organizational partners. Over the last 2 days, the value of diverse and meaningful partnerships was both demonstrated and emphasized. Within my division at the Public Health Agency, we recognize that there are opportunities to bolster mental health promotion across the life course. In the wider Center for Mental Health Promotion and Wellbeing, we approach this work in various ways, including prevention of family and gender-based violence, prevention of substance-related harms, and suicide prevention. I'm optimistic that our teams at the Public Health Agency and other organizations are eager to apply these new perspectives into their programming, research, and policy work. Throughout this event, I was also happy to see that many community-based agencies that are involved in our other funded programs, such as the Community Action Program for Children, the Canadian Prenatal Nutrition Program, and the Aboriginal Head Start in Urban and Northern Communities Program, participated in this event. Mental health promotion cuts across sectors, and your participation reiterates that. One of the key objectives of the Innovation Fund and Mental Health COVID initiative is to foster the exchange of information and ideas. This symposium was designed to facilitate connections with others who actively work to promote mental health for children, youth, and families. I would like to recognize the fantastic work of the KD&E the KD&E Hub and the 2 project streams for delivering such a valuable symposium where many key actors could come together in their work to continue advancing the field of mental health promotion for young Canadians. I learned a lot through the discussions and presentations. Thank you to the Innovation Fund projects and the new MH COVID projects for sharing your stories through the breakout groups, presentations, and gallery walk. It was an opportunity to get a look into the important work you do in your communities. This knowledge helps us all to reflect on the challenges and opportunities to leverage the momentum gained. I want to acknowledge the strong leadership of Colleen McMillan and Alice Schmidt-Hanbridge, along with the support of Renison University College and the University of Waterloo to present this comprehensive and necessary forum with the KD&E Hub. Advancements in the field of mental health promotion require intersectoral action, accountability, and engagement from a range of stakeholders. This event shows that this knowledge is recognized across our communities. I appreciate the intentional effort that Colleen, Alice, and the KD&E Hub team made to leverage momentum in the field by optimizing opportunities to share insights from the projects and by opening this event to the broader mental health promotion community. Thank you to the speakers who challenged us to think about mental health promotion from multiple perspectives. Some examples include the need for intergenerational involvement, youth and community engagement, accountability, and measurement of impacts, recognition of the impacts of colonization and slavery, and the need to come together from a strength-based perspective and work in partnership. The emphasis on connection to land and culture as entry point to mental health and well-being was certainly a theme that I noted. There were many themes that were echoed in the presentations and discussions today, and I know that many of these ideas will continue to influence our work in mental health promotion. Our discussions over the last 2 days have really begun to build more ideas. We can take these ideas and turn them into action when we return to work. As noted by Dr. Wendy Fletcher during the opening session, there's interconnectedness in our work, in our shared work. We do not labor alone, and it is never in vain. Many strides are being made collectively. By fostering relationships and continuing to invest in equity and address the social determinants of health, we can support long-term sustainable change for mental health promotion. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your active engagement in this symposium. I'm very excited to continue this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosamond, for those beautiful and generous thoughts and just so wonderfully weaving together all of the themes that we covered over the last 2 days and just connecting the projects and the contributors that we had. We really appreciate your words, and also we give sincere thanks to the Public Health Agency of Canada for their ongoing support and for supporting our annual symposium. Thank you. So next, we're going to complete our circle that we've been doing for the last day and a half, and we're going to come back to Elder Henry, who has joined us and will offer his reflections and to perform our closing ceremony. Welcome back, Elder Henry. Good to see you.
Thank you. So nice to be back. I can feel that there's so much knowledge in your minds right now that it's probably hard to remember all that you learned. But when we started yesterday, it was really an ignition of a time when we can spend together to learn some important things. So we lit a fire. The fire was lit to keep our hearts and our minds and our souls warm so that we can accumulate knowledge that was going to happen. And Indigenous elders always talked about doing things in a full circle. And by the end of the day or the end of the event, we would extinguish the fire and we would allow what transpired within that time to become what you need to know and how you can learn from it and share that knowledge other places. So in our traditional way, we talked this yesterday morning about the responsibility of our grandmother Moon, who looked after you, and then Father Sun that came and shined on you throughout the day so you can have some light and warmth. But something happened since that time. Something really, really important took place since I spoke with you yesterday morning. We transitioned into the third creation, which is called March, the moon that we consider it to be, in my language, Zizbakwitko de Gizis, which means sugar moon. And if we translate that to this time of year that we walked into since last night, we are now into the beginnings of the spring month. And we know that because this is the month that something very beautiful happens. The trees start to know that something needs to happen. And one of the first signs of it is the sap starts running in the maple trees. And when that sap starts running in the trees, we were given instructions on how to use that for medicine in our bodies. So we were able to take the sap and turn it into what we now know as maple syrup and maple candy. And really, you can drink that syrup when it's coming right out of the tree, because that's when we call it sweet water. And, you know, and it's not just the biological medicine that maple syrup promotes in your body. Whenever you take a taste of that, you always smile. Just have a little taste of maple syrup, put it on your tongue, and you just smile because it's that nice sweetness that, you know, only that comes from that beautiful tree. And that's medicine in itself too, to be able to have something to be happy about and smile in a good way. And our people have, and I just done a teaching previous to coming here, on our 13 moons, which says that society today has followed a new calendar that wasn't natural to the way the indigenous people followed the cycle of the year. There's actually 13 cycles in 1 year. And we call it 13 moons, and every moon has a teaching. And so when we eliminated one of those cycles, we kind of got out of balance with our relationship with our mother, the earth. And we talked about mental health, and we talked about physical issues that happen. Our elders always said, we need to get back in tune with our environment, with our mother who provides the medicine and gives us the teachings that we have to have as human beings that walk on her for a short period of time. And when we think about how the elders shared this knowledge and we reflected over a 13 moon cycle, we didn't seem to be as challenged as we are today, with the busyness life that we have, what we emphasize is our important, work that we do and the challenges that we have of just living, in a busy lifetime, paying bills, raising our children, going to school, providing the best we can. If we laid that out we're reminded every time we look at a turtle, because on the back of the turtle, there are 13 segments and there's 28 counter segments around the edge of that turtle. And that's our calendar. So we always think about that to remind us we need to get back in tune with our mother, the earth. And I think our physical challenges, our mental challenges will ease some. That's the way that our elders always talked about it. So I wanted to bring that story to you in closing because we're looking at various ways of supporting each other, whether it's through clinical ways, but our ways always included a very spiritual way. And when we think about our natural elements on the earth, it becomes more comforting within our own heart and our own mind and our body. And when we do that every day, we get a chance to probably live in a life that is a little more comfortable. Just like when that syrup touches your tongue and you smile, it makes you happy. And we need to find that happiness somewhere within our own being for the life that we live. So I want to extinguish that fire at this time. I want to make sure that we've honored that fire. And I know Colleen and Alice were great at keeping that fire alive for us over the days when I couldn't be here, and kept your hearts warm with knowledge and comfort of the professional speakers that you had and the people that came and shared. So with that said, I want to close out in the way I started, in the language that was taken away from us in the residential school. I'm going to share just a little bit of Anishinaabe Moin, which is our closing prayer and our opportunity for you. We call it a travel song, basically in our mind. It's a song that we sing after a prayer just to say that you can travel now with all the knowledge that you have. And when you go to sleep tonight, when you put your head on your pillow, try to put all that together and how you're going to relate that to the rest of those that come in contact with you, your children, your partners, your friends, how you're going to be able to pass that knowledge so it spreads that way. And so we do it this way. We'd say, Bujo maingan in Dejnakas, Deshkan Zibi no Jibah, Mangando Dem, Chimigwech, Kazam Nado, Manda Ganaj, when Gizgat Nongum, Chimigwech, Kazam Nado, Manda, Kukina Wesiak Mampi, Getchimanado, Chimigwech Minwa, Kukina Mashki, Ki, Osama Wingash, Mashko Dewish, Minwagizik. So I honored our Mother Earth, the medicine, and all the things that are important for us. And I'll close out with this real short travel song for you. And we do it this way. Way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way, way, hey, hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way, way, hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way, way, hey, hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way, way, hey, hey, way, oh, hey, hey, oh, way, oh, way. So with that said, that's from my heart to yours. Hopefully all goes well for you. And thank you for being here, and appreciate everybody who's participated in these 2 days. Miigwech, everybody. Miigwech, thank you in our language.
Miigwech, Elder Henry, what a beautiful song, the traveling song, and connecting with our Mother Earth, and all of those wonderful thoughts of coming around circle and nurturing all of the knowledge that we've gathered over the last 2 days. And I encourage everyone to keep the warmth of the fire going with all of the learnings that we've, as we move into our own communities, and encouraging us really to reflect on our symposium experience, as Elder Henry said, as we lay in our beds tonight, to let all of those thoughts percolate and all of that learning that we've been doing to continue to inspire us. And Stephanie Priest just mentioned as well in our last panel to take time to reflect. So important to do that. So thank you, Elder Henry, for your words of wisdom and for joining us today. We're very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move to our final comments for our closing. And thanks for these beautiful comments in the chat. We appreciate them.
Mhm. Yes, Alice said we have come to the end of our time together for our third annual KDE symposium. And I can speak for our team, and it has been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have each and every one of you join us yesterday and today. And before we share our final thoughts as chairs, we want to provide just a few important housekeeping items that we think will be of interest to you. Number one, we will have post annual symposium products, including all of those really valuable session recordings, and they will be on our Hub website sometime in March, so please keep an eye out for them. And we will announce their availability also through email and through our newsletter as well. And we also welcome you to sign up, if you already haven't, to our regular updates that we post about webinars and new Hub products. And the link is posted in your chat. Number two is the Whova platform will be remaining open for the coming weeks. And so you can return once you go home, or if you are at home, to continue to collect those resources, or just to continue the conversation that you started yesterday and today. And thanks to so many of you who have told us that you like to use this platform. So that's a great information for us to have as feedback. And lastly, when you leave this meeting, you'll be prompted to complete an event evaluation, of course. A link is also now being posted in the chat that will take you to this evaluation, and we will provide it again through email. However you get to that link, we really ask that you take just a few moments to share your thoughts that are so valuable to us as we continue to learn how to do things differently. So I'm just going to share a few of my final thoughts, and then I'm going to hand it over to my co-chair, Alice. So again, we're really thankful. We're honored that you chose to join us in these last 2 days to engage with so many wonderful sessions. You shared your observations. You posed such thoughtful questions. We discovered new insights together. We made new connections on our collective journey to leverage momentum for mental health promotion. You were invited yesterday when we started off as a group to join a new community of thinkers and doers, change agents for making mental health promotion look and to be different. And as Stephanie Priest emphasized, to really get away from the silo work, and that was also emphasized by Gregor Henderson. We look forward at the KDE Hub to building momentum for change and for doing it differently as a result of these 2 days in collaboration and in conjunction with you in the next year. I do have consent, I do have permission to share this statement by Berkeley, who is a lead from the Viper Project. And I was fortunate to hear this statement because I just happened to be in the youth breakout room earlier this afternoon. Berkeley made a statement about the importance of, and I quote, looking at how we got to where we are. And that just really resonated with me. And thank you, Berkeley, for allowing me to share it. I would like to think that we did some of this over the last 2 days. And now the journey is where we will go, supported by the momentum of knowledge and community. And now over to my co-chair, Alice, for her parting thoughts.
Thanks, Colleen. We want to express our gratitude to the Public Health Agency of Canada for the many ways in which they support our work at the KDE Hub. Your continued support, encouragement, guidance, and resourcing makes our work possible. We have been inspired and encourage all of you to go back to your communities and take all you've learned and share the knowledge, share the wisdom, share the thoughts and inspiration. And we look forward to connecting with you over the coming year. And a final thank you to Elder Henry. Your gift of the fire sustained us over the last 2 days, and the sparks from that fire will keep us warm and alive in our journey toward the momentum of mental health promotion in Canada. Be well, merci, and au revoir to everyone. Thank you.